It's really exciting to be here with you guys. I feel like I'm the token granddad of the conference. All of the speakers are all very much my kids' age. I've got 4 grandchildren, and you might want to put a picture of. I had a picture of my family. I don't know if you can put it up there. There it is. So this is my little family on mission, and we've been in inner city London for 36 years. I'm the founder leader of the Well Community Church. And I help lead the Pioneer Network in London, and looking also at developing a thing called Reach London, which is to help church leaders, because I'm passionate about helping church leaders ask the right questions. And we're growing that conversation, and I think that's the key. And this is what's going on here, which is what I find so stimulating. It isn't always coming up with the right answers, it's asking the right questions first. And I think that's what I'm hearing coming through this morning, this afternoon. Is it morning still? It's still morning. So I just want to share really out of the somewhat almost 40 years of ministry that there's something going on now which is really moving us forward in a new way. And I love the fact that this is all about culture. We are living at the cross-section of 5 different age and generations, and all of them speak a different language. We've got, I'm part of the boomers generation. There's a more traditional generation above me. There's the next generation, the X-Gen, and then the millennials, and then the Y-Gen, and there's Y-I-Gen I've just learned. You know, I'm just discovering that there's another language that is needing to be learned in order for us to be able to thrive as church leaders. And church leaders are all working in cross-cultural contexts simply because every one of these generations has a different language, because that's the pace of change that we're in this culture at the moment, in this country. And Pete's done a fantastic job of explaining what culture is. And really my challenge to us this morning is, what cultures do we need to build? And I think it's already been coming out of what we've been sharing. What cultures do we need to build in order for us to see the church thrive in the years ahead? And I believe the church is a family system. That if we're going to understand the church, we don't need just to understand organizational factors. We need to be deeply literate and able and fluent in family systems, because healthy leaders produce healthy families, produce healthy churches, which produce healthy communities, which produce healthy cities. Amen? And so we need to start with ourselves. It's been said, and I'm just really absolutely underlining that my testimony is that we've been able to see a measure of flourishing. We're a mid-sized family church, and I think even just to see yourself in the inner city stay the same size is almost an achievement, isn't it? You've got to grow at the rate of at least 1/3 of your numbers every 3 years, because that third leaves. So I feel like we've planted over this period that we've had the well, we've probably planted about 6 churches over that period, just by managing to stay where we are. At least that's my way of encouraging myself, all right? Now, that's not good enough. I think the challenge for us is all, how do we see and release a movement of multiplication? And in the process of us seeing us thrive, I think these things and these questions have got to be the key ones that we're asking. How do we multiply? What is sustainable mission? Can we move on to the other slide, Lucy? I've got 3 questions I just want us to launch. So there's my family on mission here, the wider group. But I started asking these questions about 8 years ago from a fresh hunger to see what it was that God wants to do in mission, and to see how we're going to move forward. So if we can move on. I just want to look at these 3 things, because I believe Jesus started with the end in mind, and he's the most perfect example we can go to. So without lots of theology, I just want to draw on one thing that he did, which was that he started with 12, and this has been underlined again and again. He invested in a few people, the early adopters, whatever we want to label them, those people who were responsive to the vision and the calling that he was casting. And he made a personal invitation, and he started to build a culture which I would call a discipling culture, to see sustainable mission. Have we got those other slides? Probably not. Never mind. You're working on it. Okay. But sustainable mission is a big issue, isn't it? Because I've seen over the years, my colleagues burn out, just not knowing how to continue to sustain the work and the call that God has given them. And so for me, the question of sustainability is a totally underlying vital question for us to grapple with. How do we deal with sustainability in our marriages, in our families? For better or for worse, that little family of mine that I put up there earlier are the people who have taught me the most about what it looks like to be a church leader and to be a family on mission. And if we don't understand that we are essentially a family on mission, we're probably going to draw our models either from the corporate world or from other sources, and we're going to make some errors, because the family system model is the model that Jesus gives us first and foremost. He calls us to be a family together. He calls his own family, his own biological family, to understand the priority of the kingdom family. Now, you may have noticed that in my picture earlier on, there was a lady in there called Fran Beckett, if you were very astute. Fran was a pioneer of women's ministry. She's a single lady, but somewhere along the line, she adopted us as her family, or we adopted her. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but she's become part of our family. And as we've grappled together over the years and reflected on that reflective process of asking what is sustainable and what is multipliable, then we've come up, I believe, with a few answers, and as we've learned from other people around the globe. And so I want us to ask these three questions. What do we need to do to see the church thrive in the years ahead? The first thing, I believe, is that we need to build a discipling culture. Not just to have discipleship programs, but to have a culture, as Andy's described it, where all our values, beliefs, and behaviors and systems are all geared towards helping people to become 360-degree disciples. That means not just people who read the Bible and worship, but do mission, that the whole thing is part and parcel of their discipling. And that's what I believe young people are looking for. They're looking for an integrated understanding of what it looks like to be on mission and to be part of the church. They're not interested in meetings. They're interested in an expression of church which carries right the way through into all the spheres of their lives. And if we can start to build and be intentional about that kind of culture, then I believe we will begin to thrive, and we'll begin to see churches thriving. Because the church, the job of church leaders, what is your job? Have you recently asked yourself, what is my job? I'm asking myself all the time that question. But I'm drawn right back to the job that Jesus gave us in the Great Commission. He said, go make disciples and make them of all nations. So yesterday morning, for instance, I had a group of local community leaders in my front room who've asked me and Julie to invest in them over the next year because they are leading all the parks in Lambeth. They are the key visionaries behind it, but for some reason or other, they've seen something that they want me and Julie to share it with them. So we're doing a legacy coaching operation. And so there is a transition of leadership going on. And I think if you don't start with the end in mind, then you're probably not going to bring your best to the table. And bringing our best into the table means you have some kind of succession plan. I don't know how soon or short you've been in leadership, how long you've been in leadership. If you haven't got some kind of succession plan, you're probably not bringing your best to the job of discipling. And so discipling is about taking the intentional decision to invest in some people who we know will take over our job, because we're all mortal, we all will go to glory, but before that, we want to be able to do what Jesus did, which is to raise disciples who make disciples. I love that phrase. I'm never going to get tired of it. We've heard it already so many times. We've got to have a generation who knows and is confident about and has the tools and the means to be able to invest in other people in a way that means they are also confident to invest in other people. Yeah? That it's a reproducible model. So sustainable mission looks like us making disciples. It's creating a mission. Yeah, put all the points up on those slides, because I think, and the next ones as well. All of them are part and parcel, and they all integrate. So these are the three cultures that we're building in church. We're building a discipling culture, a missional culture, and a training culture. And when we have these three pieces, or cogs, if you like, of our leadership engine, and the culture begins to click in, then you begin to see something begin to happen in the church which releases leaders who will reproduce leaders. You begin to see visions that reproduce visions. You begin to see communities that reproduce communities. And if we can support people in this process, our job as church leaders is to do just that, isn't it? Jesus said, go make disciples. He said, I will build my church. I think we swap the job descriptions. I think we so often end up thinking it's our job to build the church. And if in doing the building of the church, somehow we'll make a few disciples. But Jesus' absolute focus and model to us is that if we focus on doing the job of building missional disciples, not any old disciples, but missional disciples, if we do that really well, then we begin to see Jesus doing his bit and the church being built. Yeah? So there is a partnership between the Lord and his church, between us and the Lord, in which he's given us a job description and he's said, this is my job description. I will build my church. And the church rises on how well or how intentional we are about making disciples. Let me just, reproducible church is about this. It is about having a culture where we're outward looking. It's so easy to have a culture that looks after our own, isn't that right? That's the default position, particularly in the models of church that we're often handed, is that we look after people and we do teaching. We become service providers. If we're not careful, that's the way it operates, isn't it? And but the challenge for us as leaders is to be provocateurs, is to be those that can help people to keep looking out in what they're doing. I was presented with a really amazing statistic the other day, and that is that the Southern Baptists are both the fastest declining denomination in America and the fastest growing denomination. You think, how does that happen? Is that right? They are, because of one very simple reason. The half that is actually the fastest growing is absolutely unintentional about church planting. They've given themselves over to the strategy of reproducing, not just growing churches, but reproducing churches. And so the commitment to that has meant that we're seeing one half of a denomination growing faster than any other denomination in the States. And the other half of it that isn't committed to that is declining almost faster than any other denomination in the States. I find that kind of statistic incredible, but it indicates to me that we have to be intentional about being missional. It doesn't just happen. Bill, I'll land this. Last point, the next generation, a training culture is when we've actually understood that we've got something really valuable to give to people. I think, again, we do outsource, and I know this is challenging because of our own capacities, and we haven't often been supported in this process. How do we create a leadership pipeline? This has been mentioned by others here this morning. I do believe that creating a leadership pipeline is possible even on the micro scale. If we start small, then we can build something that builds momentum. Don't think you've got to create a big machinery that means that there's a massive training program going on. But if we're intentional again about giving and imparting the things and the skills that the Lord's teaching to us, even as we're learning them, then we start to build a training culture. So investing not only in a discipling culture, but taking those people who have got a little bit more capacity around us and saying, I want to do some training with you guys. Maybe we'll do it on the big scale, but let's at least do some training that means that those people who can carry and lift the whole thing forward. What was it? Just a few people, I think, were mentioned as so often being the catalysts to create the cultures that we want. If we can find those and do the kind of training that is going to help them to do what they do well, then we'll start to thrive as churches. Okay, let's just finish there. Ask the question, where am I at in building these three cultures in the church that I'm in? What's going on in my church? Am I thinking about discipleship? Am I thinking about training? Am I thinking about mission? And are those three things if you like, the passionate spirituality, the radical community, and the intentional mission, those three aspects of culture, are they present in my church? Go.